All right, hello everybody. What's going on? Welcome. I'm talking about Batman today. So, if you've been following the Batman news, you realize the most recent thing that has happened is they're doing this slow reveal of what the new actor Robert Pattinson is actually going to look like in his bat suit. So they've released like Matt Reeves, the director, has put out like 40 seconds of test footage of Robert Pattinson in the suit. So actually, before that, I had already, over here on the right, a couple weeks ago, I had already done a version of Robert Pattinson, what he might look like without the cowl on as Batman. And then yesterday, I penciled up this head sketch that I'm going to ink on the stream today while we're all watching and talking about, hey, Mighty, what's up? Hello. Welcome to the chat. Good to see you. So if you guys want to talk about Batman, now is the time to do it. And I thought what might be fun with that while drawing is we haven't seen the new movie yet. We have no idea how good it's going to be. I mean, I've got, let's just say, average expectations. There's been plenty of fantastic and less than fantastic Batman movies over the years. If we add one more to the great pile, that's all right. If we add one more to the not so great pile, that's all right too. I think we'll all live, but I do think this one is going to be pretty good. And I think Robert Pattinson's a good choice. Like a lot of people say, what it really comes down to is the jaw. If you got the jaw to play Batman, if you got the jaw to put on this cowl, then you're in good shape. Mighty says, I don't expect it to be that good, but I hope it is. I think we've all got similar, if not expectations, like we know that it may not live up to say the highs of, I think most people say like the best is generally The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger as the Joker. And I have rewatched, of course, I pretty much watched every Batman movie in theaters since 1989. So I have opinions about all of them. Let's go through all of them and share our opinions. But I think most people agree Dark Knight's the high watermark. It's definitely the one that made the most at the box office. And I think so good of a performance by Heath Ledger that even though unfortunately passed away that year, he still posthumously won the Oscar for Best Actor. And then flash forward again, to this year, and for 2020, or for the 2019 slate of films, Joaquin Phoenix also wins Best Actor for his portrayal of the Joker. But you know who never got it? Was Jack Nicholson. Going back, and I just rewatched earlier this week, not yesterday, a couple days ago, I got all the first four Batman films on 4K. So I was watching those in the highest resolution possible at home. And watching that first Batman film again from '89 just really takes me back. None of those Batman films remind me more of my childhood than Batman '89. And it's like we had that VHS tape when I was a kid. I saw it in the theaters. It was actually funny. My parents went to see it first without me and my younger brother to make sure it was appropriate because we were young kids. And I think it was a PG-13 film. Mighty says Jack Nicholson was the greatest Joker ever. He set it off. And I really like him as the Joker, but to me, it's like there's no wrong way to do the Joker because he's such a wild card character that it's hard for me to pick a best. But you're absolutely right. He did set it off. And some of the great things about him is that he's threatening. But I could say the same about Heath. Well, Heath more than Joaquin, but Heath and Jack are both very threatening, dangerous individuals as that character. But like I was saying, my parents saw the movie first to make sure it was appropriate for their young kids to go see it. And I think my mom at the time was most concerned about, if you remember, there's the joy buzzer scene where he electrocutes another gangster in the boardroom with like a joy buzzer. He shakes his hand and just shocks him to death and leaves him as a skeleton. But she was a little concerned about that, but it's really more cartoony than anything. The thing that I was actually in that movie frightened of for years and years was in the museum when Jack Nicholson as the Joker brings out his girlfriend who he's poured acid on. And she's wearing that like Phantom of the Opera mask. And she takes it off and reveals like the scarred face. That always horrified me the most out of anything in that movie as a kid. But other than that, nothing too traumatizing. And if you were there, you absolutely remember '89 was basically Batmania. Like there's never been hype for the character as high as it was in 1989. And Jack Nicholson, I believe, got an incredibly good deal because I think he ended up getting like 1% gross on all Joker merchandise in perpetuity. Now, I don't have a source on that, but it's just a rumor I heard before. And so he made millions and millions, more so from merchandising than just from acting on that film. Mighty says the old Joker from the '60s TV show was goofy. I remember that guy. Dang it, I forgot his name. But I remember he had a mustache. The actor had a mustache, the '60s Joker, and they just painted over it. So that was the goofiest part to me, is like he wouldn't shave his mustache. It's like flash forward to Henry Cavill as Superman in Justice League. Like they had to digitally remove the mustache. Back in the '60s, they couldn't CGI it. They had to remove the mustache just by painting over it. So he was great. Funny, goofy. And then Jack Nicholson, great. Other stuff from that first Batman movie. What I really like, again, rewatching it, that first one, that I think is particularly strong about it, is that it has all these producers and actors like Jack Nicholson, Tim Burton, the director, Michael Keaton, Danny Elfman on the score, who are all kind of known for overpowering everyone they work with. But in this is like this sort of magic result where no one, I think, in that first Batman movie is overpowering anyone else. It's not too much of a Tim Burton movie. Hey, Sketch Stevens, great stuff. Thank you so much. Thanks for dropping into the chat. Danny Elfman can overpower on scores, but I think his Batman score is just perfect, and people still associate it with the character. It's kind of a shame he only did the scores, I think, for Batman and Batman Returns, and then they brought in Elliot Goldenthal, I think, for Batman Forever and Batman and Robins, they're okay, but not as great as the Elfman score. So I like everyone working together. I liked, if you watch all four of these first Batman movies, you'll notice that one of the recurring themes is that basically there's a trouble blonde. There is a blonde that comes into Bruce Wayne's life who is essentially, in one way or another, trying to get him to hang up the cowl and live a normal life. And they're never there for the next movie. But, oftentimes Batman himself is not there for the next movie. So Mighty asked, what do you think about Val Kilmer? And that's a good segue to that. Like, Michael Keaton, interesting. He's a comedic actor. So to have him to play this more dramatic role or the superhero role, I think at the time was an interesting choice. And if the internet was around in '89, it would have been one of those things, I think, that would have broken the internet. Like there would have been a lot of people who were upset about Michael Keaton being cast. And yet, flash forward 6 years later to the third movie, Batman Forever, and people are now upset that we're losing Michael Keaton. Val Kilmer, a fine choice, but I don't think it's a coincidence. Again, having just watched Batman Forever this week, I think it's done on purpose that we see him as Batman in the movie first, and then Bruce Wayne 15 minutes into the movie. It's like they're trying to cushion the blow that there is a new actor behind the mask, and they don't want to make it too obvious immediately. Although as soon as he shows up as Bruce Wayne, that was distracting to me, watching Michael Keaton, and then Val Kilmer. And I prefer, it's actually kind of a letdown. If you watch all four of these movies, it's a letdown when Michael Keaton's no longer there. And it's funny, the people who are still there are actors like Pat Hingle as Commissioner Gordon in all four movies, and Michael Gough as Alfred in all four movies. They're the ones really carrying that franchise, who are there for every outing. But Val Kilmer, fine. It's just when he's gone for the next one, that's okay too. And they bring in George Clooney for Batman and Robin. And he's an actor who I think has gone back and has just outright apologized for, that movie. And when it came out, when I watched it as a teenager, I was so cynical. I hated it. I went back and watched it years later on cable or something, and I was like, oh, that's not that bad. And then I watched it again today, a couple hours before going live. So I've watched Batman and Robin the most recently, and there's parts I like, but I'm almost back on the I hate it again train. It's really just compared, especially to those first two, again with Michael Keaton, directed by Tim Burton. they're just not, it's not a real movie. It's a lot more like the 60s TV show. And if you're in the mood for that, like this sort of expensive looking TV show, it can be good. And I think there's some performances that are really good. Like, well, Arnold Schwarzenegger's a bit of a ham. But on the other hand, I like Uma Thurman a lot as Poison Ivy. I think she gives a great performance for that character. She's the best part of the film. But George Clooney as Batman doesn't necessarily do it for me. Chris O'Donnell as like a 28-year-old Robin, kind of strange, but what are you going to do? Let's see. Caleb Richardson joining in saying Val Kilmer is actually my favorite of the three actors. Keaton played it too dark for my taste. And that's a fair opinion. I think there's definitely some weirdness to how dark Michael Keaton is at times. He almost seems distracted. Like, I don't know if it's like distracted, like he's not taking the role seriously. No, it's never that. It's like he's taking it maybe too seriously. Like the very beginning of Batman Returns, at the beginning of that movie, we see Bruce Wayne before Batman. He's like hanging out in his mansion, and the bat signal shines in the sky, and then there's reflectors, these mirrors outside of Wayne Manor that I'm sure no one ever notices, that shine the light into his study. And he just looks up at it, and it's, again, he just looks so strange and like so melancholy, so lost in thought, so upset that he lost Vicky Vale. I don't know what it is, but like I said, he always seems sort of disconnected, especially as Bruce Wayne. IG Fine Artist saying hello from Montenegro. Hello, IG. Welcome to the channel. I'll give your channel a shout out as well as Mighty. Love the art you guys put up. But again, comparing those three bad actors, those 90s bad actors, Keaton, Kilmer, and Clooney. If Kilmer's your favorite, I understand it. If someone said Clooney was their favorite, I would have to ask for justification. I'm not sure how that could be. How could that be? My bar none favorite, though, again, it's possible a lot of it just has to do with I saw this at a young age and it stuck with me. And I think that's really a lot of that's the case. Is that first Batman movie. Like, rewatching that one this week, like, every scene stands out as a classic. So I'll also give a lot of credit to the guy who got the screenwriting credit for that, script by Sam Hamm, who I don't know as having written a lot of other things, but his Batman movie, I think, has everything it needs. And also in an era before CGI and sort of the limitations of what they could do with action and the character's costume and everything, I think still holds up. Although you can tell, like, looking at it, that Batman can't necessarily, like, turn his neck. He's kind of like an owl. He's got to turn his old upper torso. Caleb says, Clooney was my favorite as a kid, but as I got older, Batman and Robin just got worse and worse every time I rewatched it. And Mighty says, I was legit scared of Danny DeVito as the Penguin. So going in these comments backwards, last one in, first one out. Yeah, I'm still this week scared of Danny DeVito's Penguin. I don't know what they were thinking. They had, like a McDonald's Happy Meal promotion on the line. They gave Tim Burton too much power, I'll say. Too much leeway for what he could do with the series with Batman Returns. Penguin is too creepy. And even other versions of Penguin that have, like, say, the flippers, they've eased off on how creepy it is. Like the Batman cartoon version from the animated series. Similar design to DeVito, but not nearly as, not doing things like going up and just biting people on the face, just eating raw fish, walking around in his gross pajamas. Man, what a mess. A little too much. And it's like, I remember complaining or hearing complaints as a kid about some of these later movies have too much going on. So I think, for example, Batman Returns could have just been a Max Schreck, Christopher Walken villain with Catwoman in there, and Penguin could be cut entirely. And make like the mayoral candidate, Max Schreck's son, who I want to say, really funny, the actor's name, did I write this down? I did not write the actor's name down, but the guy playing Christopher Walker's son, Max Schreck's son, in Batman Returns is so funny because he's basically doing an impression of Christopher Walken. So that to me is, going back and watching it now, in terms of comedy, the funniest part of that movie is the impression Christopher Walker's Max Schreck's son, the impression that guy is doing of Christopher Walken, so good. So what did Caleb say before that? You liked Clooney more as a kid, but as you got older, Batman and Robin got worse and worse. Yeah, when I was a kid, or when I was a teenager, I should say, I hated it. I kind of came around on it and was like, okay, it's just more like a 60s TV show. There's some okay elements here. It's not terrible. Again, I really like Poison Ivy. But now, after watching it again today, I am starting to hate it again. I have problems, we'll say. DeVito should have got an Oscar for that, is what Mighty says. Maybe. Interesting. It would have been fine to see him nominated, I'll say that. And then also Caleb, next comment is saying, I was never a fan of Batman 89 and Batman Returns. I never like a Batman that kills. Good point. And when in the first 5 minutes, Batman straps a bomb to a minion and drop kicks him into a hole to explode. Right, I think we're talking about the fight with the Red Triangle gang at the beginning of Batman Returns. He's got kind of a murder lust in that movie. I'll agree with you. That's kind of a mess. IG is saying, well, this is the only one which I watched. I agree, DeVito should get an Oscar. We got some DeVito stands in the audience. I understand it. The guy's great. I love him on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Back to the idea of like a Batman that kills is wrong. It is wrong, and it's especially weird, like in these movies, like they all in theory take place in the same universe. I think of it as like these weird sort of alternate universes where the Val Kilmer movie is a universe where like Batman and Batman Returns happened, but it was Val Kilmer instead. And the same with George Clooney. Like those first 3 movies happened in that universe, but with George Clooney. But keeping that in mind, I think it's weird, like there's this whole like motivation for revenge in Batman Forever, where Robin, as played by Chris O'Donnell, really wants revenge on Two-Face for killing his family. And so Batman's like, well, what's that going to get you? How's revenge going to help? Like, once you murder him, once you kill him, it's not going to make anything better. And it's just strange for a guy to say that who, as Caleb points out, has been doing a lot of murder throughout the years for the bad guys. Like, what's one more bad guy, especially Two-Face? The other crazy thing about Two-Face is there's a bit of a casting change there. People may not notice, but you go back, you rewatch the first Batman movie, Harvey Dent is played by Lando Calrissian, Billy D. Williams. And the understanding there, I think he signed up for that movie with the assumption that in a sequel, he would be Two-Face and he would get like the Jack Nicholson deal, I think. He wants... And I honestly think that's why a lot of actors signed up, big name actors signed up for these movies, is because they saw how lucrative it was for Jack Nicholson. And they're like, I got to get me some of that. But I don't know how many of them ever got a merchandising deal as good as Jack. And even if they did, like say Arnold Schwarzenegger got merchandise revenue for Mr. Freeze, well, I don't think they sell as much Mr. Freeze stuff as they do, say, Joker stuff. But who knows? I could be wrong. There was Mr. Freeze Happy Meal toys. So Mighty's saying we should get a Nightwing movie soon. I'll support it. Yeah, I'd watch that too. I don't know. Let me know who we think should be Nightwing. I'm not sure off the top of my head who's the best choice. And then Kyle, I notice, is in the chat. Hello, Kyle. Saying hello, Evan. Hello, everybody. Everyone check out, if you haven't already, Thrilla Art. That's Kyle's channel. He's doing great things over there. Just did, Cupid Sparrow yesterday for Valentine's Day. Hope everyone had a good Valentine's Day, too. And going back, I think I missed one. Caleb said, that's why I liked Batman Forever. It had a more comic-accurate personality for Batman. I think we're talking about, like, he wasn't as much, he didn't have that murder lust. So that would definitely be comic-accurate. And, I like the Easter eggs, I guess you'd call them, the minor Easter eggs of things like, he says in that movie, the circus must be, like, halfway to Metropolis by now. At the time, everyone was thinking, like, oh, you know what that means? Next movie, Superman. It took almost another 2 decades for them to team up in a movie. And I think it was with Batman versus Superman. When we got there, people were disappointed. It definitely didn't make as much money as just Batman on his own with The Dark Knight. So you would think, Batman and Superman together, that's a lock. But we also maybe dodged a bullet in the 90s. I think we all know Nicolas Cage was in the running to be Superman at one point. And that would have been, I don't know, it would have been something. I almost wish, they had made it just to see how crazy it would have been. But at the time, hearing about it and listening to, say, Kevin Smith talk about it, because Kevin Smith's got some famous stories about writing a script for the Superman movie. in the 90s, and he did that whole tour where he talks about the story of meeting the producer, John Peters, who had produced some of those Joel Schumacher movies, Batman and Robin, and I think Batman Forever. And so, deserves some of the credit or some of the blame for, however you want to put it, the cartoony elements of those movies. Let's see. Now, Mighty saying, now I remember Arnold as Mr. Freeze. He is, watching this on 4K today, like, it is great how awesome the makeup looks. And, like, he's got some great costumes in that of, like, when he's chilling in the cooler, he's wearing, like, his robe that's all this sort of, like, ice blue style. That's very cool. I like that. I like the costume. I like the makeup. Production values are very high in those movies. But after the second one, some might say after the first one, the scripts really fall off, and it's not so much a real movie. Again, it's more of like fantastic episode of a show. Monkey C joining the chat. Hello. You're saying Uma Thurman was an awesome looking Poison Ivy. I absolutely agree. I think, again, having watched it today, that's my favorite part of the movie is Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy. She was on fire around that time because she's in one of my favorite movies ever that also came out the same year, the next year, as Batman and Robin, and that is Gattaca. And that's coming off the high of, she was in Pulp Fiction a couple years before that, right? So she was doing great in the 90s, great things. And her performance in Batman and Robin, I'll tell you why I specifically like that, is it always has this sort of undertone of she knows she can control everybody, but she's like constantly, she waits a tick. She like waits a second to see like, wait a second, are they going to break out of the spell? No? Okay, I'll do what I want. And I like that aspect of the performance. I think it's really good. It's really subtle in my eyes. Some people I think don't like, one of the things to pick apart about the movie is Bane. They really do not do the comic book accurate version of Bane. So if you're a Bane fan, if you stand for Bane, then I could see being upset with how things go in Batman and Robin. Although him is like, again, on the side of I like comedy, him as like a chauffeur for Poison Ivy wearing like gloves and a hat and driving an old car and just saying, step on it. He's a funny sort of Frankenstein monster, but it's not Bane. It's an easy fix though. Just give him a different name. You don't have to call him Bane. What else we got in here? Caleb's saying there's a theory floating around that Ben Affleck's Batman is a continuation of Keaton's Batman from Batman 89 and Batman Returns, given Affleck's Batman apparently started crime fighting in the 90s. That would be cool. I think we might have to leave it at that. I think at this point it's maybe just only ever going to be a theory because, I don't know, I could be surprised and he comes back for another movie, but I think that's it. I think Justice League, Batman vs. Superman, and that cameo in Suicide Squad are all we will ever see, unfortunately, so we may never know. And I really want to know, what happened to Robin? We got that Robin costume in, Batman v Superman. Did the Joker kill Robin? Did Robin become the Joker? That was another theory I heard. I don't know. IG, thank you for joining the chat. We will see you real soon. But it's just like this unestablished or unresolved plot point about what happened to Robin in the Ben Affleck universe. And also, if there was a Robin, I think there's also an argument there for it's a continuation of not just Michael Keaton, but also the Val Kilmer and George Clooney Batmans. And again, it might be like my alternate universe take where, okay, all those movies to some degree or another happened in the Ben Affleck universe, but just with Ben Affleck starring as Batman. Let me know what you think of that one. Another really, really funny thing about Batman Returns, I hadn't never noticed this before, but in the background of the boardroom where Max Schreck, Christopher Walken, does all his evil work, there is a board of like pictures of Max Schreck, the character, photos of him with all the celebrities he knows. And one of them is, that's right, you guessed it, Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's so great. There's like a photo of Christopher Walken as Max Schreck with Arnold Schwarzenegger on the wall in Batman Returns. But, the in-movie universe thing might actually be, it's not Arnold Schwarzenegger. It is Victor Fries, because he does end up playing that character. So I'll just say that. I'll give him credit for this sort of foreshadowing or story seeding ahead of time, even if they don't deserve it. I think that's really funny. And I think, like most people, at the time, I was maybe too young to be scandalized by, the tight leather of Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. But something that I noticed, not just for this movie, that all of them to some degree or another, but especially the Tim Burton two, and especially that second one, especially Returns, but all these movies have, it's a lot more, there's more romantic interest and just more outright horniness in these 90s Batman movies than I remember at the time. And certainly part of that is that there's always like a love interest in the movies, which, you can compare that to, say, the Christopher Nolan movies, where it's like the love interest is more like, Rachel is Bruce's childhood friend who's trying to get him to give up being Batman. Or does she know he's Batman? No, wait. But she's basically just trying to get him to act normal, but he just wants to be Batman. So there's no real romance there. It's not really what those movies are about. There's some of that in the third one, but it's not nearly to the degree that you see where it always, in every movie, it's like this serious temptation for, like, is Batman going to give it all up for Vicky Vale, or for Catwoman, or for Elle Macpherson, or for, the third one, Dr. Chase Meridian? Actually, I take it back. I thought Batman Returns was the horniest. Batman Forever is by far just, there's the most id on display, I'll say, in Batman Forever. Everyone's just going all out with their performances. And I think maybe that was a huge part of that is just like Jim Carrey being on set and everyone following his lead. He's ridiculous. And to me, going back, watching it, kind of annoying. Jim Carrey, I'll say it, kind of annoying in Batman Forever, but he's got one or two great jokes. And I'll tell you, the best joke he's got is, if Val Kilmer's got like this mole over here, beauty mark, whatever, and there's a sequence where they're at like a charity event as Bruce Wayne and the Riddler as Edward Nygma. And Edward, Jim Carrey, he's there with Drew Barrymore as his arm candy, who's playing, I think the character's name is like Sugar, one of Two-Face's henchmen. There's Sugar and Spice, and she's Sugar. She's the angel character. So she's on Jim Carrey's arm, and at one point he asks her, "How's my mole?" Because he put on like a mole like Val Kilmer to be more like Bruce Wayne in the movie. And that one stopped me in my tracks. I forgot that joke, and I was laughing at it out loud. So funniest bit in Batman Returns is absolutely when Max Schreck's son is doing the impression of Christopher Walken for his performance. And funniest bit of Batman Forever, Jim Carrey asking, "How's my mole?" Mighty's got to take off. Thanks for joining us. Glad you were here. Have a good day. And Caleb saying, with a new Batman, I kind of want a new Superman. Give me a semi-known actor, but not an A-lister. Someone like Liam Hemsworth from Hunger Games for Superman. I can see it. I would take that one. I think what's funny about the Superman casting is, like, I think Henry Cavill was originally considered, like, back in the early 2000s when they eventually went with Brandon Routh for Superman Returns. So he was basically waiting. He was like the understudy who got called up to the show, to mix all my metaphors. He had to wait a couple years, but he eventually became Superman. I wonder if they've got like another guy like that who's not quite famous, but they have him on camera. They have like his screen test. You're like, okay, you're ready to pull him up to the big leagues. Is Cavill done? I don't know. Again, I like most people, I've been kind of underwhelmed by how the DC Extended Universe handled both Batman and Superman. I don't think it's terrible by any means. And there's even parts in just the Justice League movie, which is like such a random mishmash of stuff. There's parts in that I like. But like others, I would also at this point like to see the Snyder Cut. And other stuff, actually, I haven't said this piece of trivia yet, but who's actually been in the most Batman movies? More than any character who's played Batman proper or the Joker or any other character, or even like Commissioner Gordon and Michael Gough, who played, Pat Hingle played Commissioner Gordon and Michael Gough played Alfred. Those guys were in 4 movies each. But who's been in the most Batman movies? Senator Patrick Leahy. Senator from Vermont, who's a huge Batman fan, and always gives the money he earns to charity, to a library that when he was growing up, he read Batman comics there. But it's just funny, that guy, that senator, has been in Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. He plays himself in Batman and Robin. He's a senator in Batman versus Superman, again, one of the senators that gets exploded. And he was in The Dark Knight. He has the line at the party, something about like, we're not threatened by punks like you or something. He says that to the Joker. He stands up to Heath Ledger's The Joker. So that might be his most famous on-screen line. But it's just an interesting piece of trivia. This senator is the one who has been in the most Batman movies, believe it or not. You're right, Monkey C, you guessed it. Is it the senator? You jumped in there. Let's see. Caleb says that Cavill has stated he's open to returning, but he wants to be able to do what he wants until then, a.k.a. The Witcher, which, to be fair, I watched a couple minutes of The Witcher, and it didn't hold my attention. I'm not sure if I'm the right, audience for it. I know a lot of people are enjoying it, but it wasn't quite for me. I say that about a lot of things on Netflix, though. Should I go back to it? Is it worth watching? I don't know. I'll tell you where I love Cavill, though. I absolutely love Cavill in Mission Impossible. Now, there is a franchise, not to turn this Batman live stream into a discussion about Mission Impossible, but that's a franchise that I think has really been able to hold quality in the movies over 2 decades. But maybe, if Michael Keaton, for example, had held on to the role of Batman and become increasingly involved in the production of the movies, maybe it would be like where Mission Impossible is, that would be where Batman is. That'd be funny. And then eventually, instead of making Birdman, he did that like as literally just a Batman movie. That would have been something to see. Thrilla Art, not to turn the conversation to a far-off topic, but I always thought Gary Oldman would have been excellent as the Joker, but he was cast as Commissioner Gordon. That's right, which he was great as, to be fair. That guy's amazing. You're right, he could play a real wild card. Like if we can compare, say, the straight man role he takes on as Commissioner Gordon to, say, The Fifth Element. I'm sure you've seen that. With Gary Oldman just chewing up the scenery. That would really be, I think, proof. I think that's proof that he could be a great Bat villain. He could be the Joker, for sure. I agree with that. Even now, if they want to, just ignore prior casting and bring him back as the Joker, that's fine. We've already got multiple Jokers running around. Caleb says, that reminds me of the guy who stands up to Loki in Avengers, who is apparently a real Holocaust survivor and who had worked at Marvel for years as an assistant. I did not know that. That's interesting. I'm going to look that up after the stream to get more information on that, because that's very interesting trivia. And that's cool, too. So, other people, again, I'm kind of let down that Ben Affleck didn't get to make the solo Batman movie that he wanted. And I think what I had heard for that was that this was going to be set a lot like in Arkham. Maybe it was like he gets trapped in Arkham for some reason, so a lot closer to the video games maybe, and he's got to like fight his way out. But I think that was also similar to the treatment for the unproduced 5th Batman film back in the late 90s, early 2000s, like Batman Triumphant, which I believe at the time was also going to feature, that was going to have the Scarecrow. There was a statement at the time that like maybe Howard Stern would play the Scarecrow. Imagine that. King of all media as a Bat villain. And then there would be like, you use the fear gas on him, and there'd be like a scene where Jack Nicholson returns as Joker in a vision for Batman. So that would have really been something. Of course, they didn't do it, and then the next Batman movie had some elements of that with like, the Scarecrow using his fear toxin in Batman Begins. But that's, at that point, those Nolan movies, I think we all agree, are kind of like a hard reset. In Thrilla Art, Kyle's saying, yep, Fifth Element and The Professional, there's a bit of Joker in those characters. Embarrassing to admit, but I haven't seen The Professional yet. It's been on my watch list for almost 2 decades at this point. But soon, probably in 2020, you're probably asking yourself, why are you going back to watch all these Batman films you're not going to enjoy when there's all these films you haven't watched that are great? And I like Luc Besson, too. I like The Fifth Element. I like not just the great ones, but I like what people say are the average ones. I like Valerian. I like Anna, the assassin movie that came out last year. But I got to go back and watch The Professional. Let's see. It's good. I've heard it's good. I've heard nothing but great things about it, so I know I got to check it out. What I meant to watch last week, I haven't gotten around to it yet, but with the passing of Michael Douglas's father, Kirk Douglas, I meant to go back and watch Spartacus, because that's one I know that I need to see, and I've never seen it before, and it would be a good time for it, but unfortunately, I haven't watched it yet. I've been in kind of a bat mode. What's funny, though, is that even with this, there's essentially a Batman movie in theaters, right? Birds of Prey is in theaters. It's been there for 2 weeks, and Alana and I have not gone to see it. There's still a possibility we might go this weekend, but it's kind of, with or without our help, it looks like it's crashing and burning at the box office. And not a lot of people are going to see it compared to Suicide Squad, sort of the, not prequel, but precursor to this movie with Harley Quinn. And I think, just going on the marketing materials, I think it was a mistake with Birds of Prey. Having not seen the movie, I can't judge the movie on its own merits. But in terms of marketing and in terms of just what I see, that Harley Quinn costume from Suicide Squad defined a generation. If you've been to any Halloween in the past 4 years or any comic convention, you have seen just how popular that look has become. And I think moving away from that look, or not finding a look that can just obviously immediately replace this as a look that the fans will, want to copy and emulate in cosplay and in art, fan art. I think that was a mistake to move away from that. The movie itself could be great, but I think just the costume design, seems like makeup is fine. And, they did, I don't know if it's the same makeup team, but remember, Suicide Squad did win the Oscar for best makeup. I think they should have gotten costumes too, because again, just like those Adidas pumps and the shirt that says Daddy's Little Monster, just that look is iconic. You have never seen, this is like the argument against always being completely loyal to the original look of the comics or the cartoon in this case, where she's a lot more like actual Harley Quinn in the cartoon. And they changed the look both in the Arkham City games, the video games, and in the Suicide Squad movie. But they didn't have to keep it exactly the same because people appreciate this new stuff. So you can experiment, you can do new things. It's not always a Bane situation like in Batman and Robin. Let's see, Monkey C, it's the first really functional hero-villain costume. Yes, absolutely. And Caleb saying, I need to watch a lot of 80s and 90s horror action movies. The Terminator, Predator, Alien. Yes, of those three, well, it's actually hard to decide. I want to say, just out of hand, Alien's the one you got to see. If you haven't ever seen the original Alien from 1979, directed by Ridley Scott, seek it out and watch it. It is as good as any current movie, if not better. It absolutely holds up. A lot of I've watched it in the last 6 months again. I can confirm. Still great. Predator, I think, also still great. Terminator, one I haven't seen. I've seen Terminator 2. I've seen Terminator 3. I've seen Terminator Salvation. And I've even seen, what was the fifth one? Genesis. I haven't seen Dark Fate, and I haven't seen the first one. But at least I know I've still got one good Terminator movie to watch, because I know the first one will be good, sort of 80s, well, just a complete 80s aesthetic, and I know I'll enjoy it. Kyle agrees, all those movies are fantastic. Alien is really great, and I know Kyle has got a video celebrating Jack Burton in Big Trouble in Little China, which is one I had not seen back in the day, but I finally got around to it. So that's one, too, that I would say, absolutely, if you haven't seen Big Trouble in Little China, got to check it out. That's an 80s movie that everyone should see at some point or another. Besides that, there's some hidden gems that I think everyone should see from the 80s. Not Back to the Future. Back to the Future is not a hidden gem. It's just a diamond. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows it's great. But a hidden gem is Flight of the Navigator with the same composer, Alan Silvestri, but an all synthesizer score. And that's got a kid that I thought for years was Fred Savage. And I went back and I was like, oh, that's not Fred Savage. But Flight of the Navigator, great 80s movie. Hidden gem, worth watching. And then anything else, let me know in the chat. To be fair, the main DCEU timeline is in pieces right now. Yes, so I think they're playing fast and loose. I also think, sorry guys if I'm dropping in and out on the stream, I think I might have hit like a pause there for a second. I'm not sure how my stream's doing. Oh, YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. So viewers are experiencing buffering. So sorry about that. I knew this was going to happen eventually. Like, this is me relying on Wi-Fi to get this done. I got to plug in an Ethernet cable for sure. But if they're playing fast and loose with the Birds of Prey timeline, then, you know, I'm sure I'll get to it, even if it's not something I see until it's like streaming on Netflix or HBO or just picking up the disc or something, Redbox it. I'm sure I will get to it eventually. Although here's actually where I'm a little sad because Alana, my beautiful wife, and I love to see movies at the Dolby Cinema. But if you snooze, you lose. And Birds of Prey is a perfect example of that. It was in the Dolby Cinema for no more than a week. We slept on it. We snoozed. So now Sonic the Hedgehog is in Dolby Cinema. And I believe Birds of Prey is filmed in 4K. Might actually be filmed 3.4K. But then mastered in 4K. So would have been one to watch in that format. But we missed it, unfortunately. Guys, let me know in the chat, please, if the buffering is really affecting the viewing quality of this, because it seems like it's okay again, but there might have been a problem there for a second. But otherwise, back to the show. And I swear, next time, before I do this, I'm going to do another stream. I think I'm getting into the groove of like Wednesdays and Saturdays. So on Wednesday, I will try my best to have an Ethernet cable plugged into my laptop instead of just relying on the Wi-Fi, which I know is a mistake. And honestly, I should know better because I don't use, like just with the TV, you know, if you want to run Netflix or whatever, I always put an Ethernet cable, just jack it into the TV. You know, another thing, so I'm drawing the Robert Pattinson version. I heard a rumor that the chess symbol, the bat symbol, is actually guns. The guns that killed Bruce Wayne's parents. He found the gun, he smashed it, took it apart, and used that to make the bat. So it's like he uses what killed his parents now as a shield, which is an interesting story beat. I wonder if they went with it, but I think the rumor's coming from, this is actually a story Kevin Smith did in Detective Comics 1000 last year. If you read that comic, he actually wrote that story where Batman, in disguise as Matches Malone, goes and finds the gun that killed his parents and makes it his bat symbol. And it looks like, if you look at the test footage that got released and the image that got released in the last couple days, I believe it. That's what it looks like to me. So let me know what you think about that. Is the chest emblem actually the gun taken apart? Big if true. That's all I can say. Let's see. Caleb also says, I've seen very few 80s that aren't franchises, like Star Wars, Star Trek, Indiana Jones. I think you've seen all these is what you're saying. And I think it's pretty normal. Most everyone, you have seen those. And also recently you watched E.T., War Games. That's a really good one. And The Last Starfighter, another hidden gem. I was lucky to see that as a kid. There is, I think, the slightly traumatizing bit in there of, like, he goes off into space, right? And they leave, like, an android or a robot or some alien in disguise on Earth to, like, be there in his place. And at one point, like, the alien takes off his head and the kid wakes up and sees the alien with its head off and he's like, go back to sleep. I may be misremembering that because I haven't watched it in maybe 30 plus years. But I remember enjoying it, and it's probably one to go back to now. And I did rewatch E.T. in the last year, too. It's still great. I get why Spielberg had the career he did, like the popularity he got, because E.T., it's amazing now. I can only imagine, like, what a breath of fresh air it was compared to other stuff that was coming out at the time. Not that everything was a bad movie, but E.T. plays a lot more modern. It feels like, you could make this today. It's that good. Maybe even better. And Thrilla saying, it's only buffered for a few seconds, then it's good. Whew, good to hear. Thank you. Again, I worry about it. That reminds me a bit of, I watched on the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel the other day an interview with Todd McFarlane, comic book legend, who talks about, I think this is good advice for anything, including having a successful YouTube show, is like, he was talking about with art, you know, if you're trying to draw a face, for example, you don't just want to make the face every time 20% better, but you look at the figure as a whole, like you're drawing an entire comic book or an entire, you know, character, and you don't try to make just one part of it 20% better. You try to make every part of it 2 or 3% better. So say you take that advice, you generalize it to like YouTube, and it's like things on YouTube, you want to make every aspect of it, production-wise, a little bit better each time. But you can't just put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, and be like, I'm only going to focus on making this one aspect better. So one of those aspects I think I should focus on, the 2% that's got to be better, for example, here is with the equipment, making sure I've got an Ethernet cable plugged in instead of relying on Wi-Fi, I think. Okay. So the chat's going great. I'm really glad that there's been people here to keep the conversation going about all the movies we know and love that we grew up with. I am probably going to go till the end of inking this head sketch. Even it's taken me a little longer, again, because the conversation's so good, so it's a nice problem to have. But I'm going to go until I finish this up, which will probably put us over an hour, which is nice. Thanks for staying with me. If you can't stay for the whole thing, I also understand that too. And if you have any other questions, let me know. That's what I'm here for. Let's see, other stuff I wrote down. Again, going back to Batman Returns for a bit, I was taking heavy notes on this. I really liked some of the casting here. And it's some people that I never saw again. Like they had this this is actually a little horrific, but they had this Ice Princess character who you might remember. Batman Returns is a Christmas movie. So she's in charge of lighting up the tree. And it's a terrible scene. It's really tragic, but it's also like darkly humorous. I can see what Tim Burton was going for. I'll say that. And that is like at one point she gets killed and basically tossed from the top of a building or a helicopter or something. And she falls on the switch that lights up the tree. So early in the film, she hits the button, lights up the tree. Later, they murder her, throw her on the switch, and she lights up the tree. Terrible, very dark humor. I'm not sure how Warner Brothers even let Tim Burton get away with these decisions. Again, knowing that they've got the McDonald's Happy Meal deal lined up for this movie. But Christy Conaway, as the Ice Princess, I think did an amazing job with that small role. Remember, there's no small roles, only small actors. Let's see. Shawshank Redemption. Oh, Thrilla Art's making another suggestion. If you've never seen Shawshank Redemption, check it out. That was one that became like a bit of a cult hit because it was one that like was in theaters and no one really knew about it, I don't think. And then it really found a second life on home video. That's where I saw it. I knew people in the 90s who was like, they said this was their favorite, absolute favorite movie. Not favorite, Batman movie, but favorite movie. And I get that for sure. And it's interesting. I didn't know at the time it was a Stephen King movie. Like I always thought of him as like, oh, the It guy, the horror guy, The Stand. But he also does things like Stand By Me or The Green Mile or this one, Shawshank Redemption. It's got a wide range of talents. So I agree with that suggestion as well. And don't look up anything about the Shawshank Redemption before you watch it. Kyle adds that too. And that's probably a good point. You don't want it spoiled. I don't think. Let's see, did I put out anything else down about what I was thinking about these movies? Oh, looking at the 90s movies, it's really interesting to see a couple things change. Like, for one, in the 89 movie, it's definitely one of those plots where a lot of it could be resolved if everyone had a cell phone. You know, there's a lot of people being like, I just came from this other location and this person's got information. We got to go meet them there. And a lot of meet cutes and running into people at the right time. And if there was digital networking and technology, it would have been a lot easier to, get these sort of things resolved. And it's funny to like compare that to by the time we get to Batman and Robin, it's like we're now in like the online computer revolution. So there's this whole element of like at the end, they've got to hack the satellites to heat up frozen Gotham City. And, Batgirl and Robin have a fight about who's the better computer hacker, which was just not a skill that was part of the plots like 2 or 3 movies ago. And then the other big thing, also with computers, but in terms of how they produce the movies, was sort of the development of CGI. You know, in the first movie, no CGI. I can't remember. I don't think there's much, if any, CGI in the second movie, in Batman Returns. But definitely, by the time we get to 1995, Batman Forever, there's CGI, and they want you to know it. Like, they start with the title screen, like the letters, the font is flying at you in these like very starkly rendered CGI fonts from the 90s. You know, the Batman Forever font. And it's just like, wow, the computer revolution is here. The digital revolution is here for sure. And there's also, I'm sure you can picture the shot. If you remember Batman Forever, there's this shot of him. It's all CGI, not the real actor, but just one shot, I think, in the movie of him jumping off the building and flying down and like slowing his descent with his cape. And that's a digital shot. But then by the time a couple years later we get to Batman and Robin, there's a bunch of scenes of that. And I was actually, at the beginning of Batman and Robin, I was like, oh, I give this movie some credit because this is all stunts. Like, as goofy as it is, like they're in the Museum of Natural History and like they're skating down the back of the dinosaur and like then they're ice skating and they've got the bat ice skates. But it's all stunt work. It's kind of like, it's like Batman on ice in more ways than one. It's got that sort of theatrical quality. But it is also... It's, you know, it's impressive because it's the most action I think we've seen up to that point in a Batman movie. And, you know, maybe there's even an argument for Batman and Robin having the most coherent action because, you know, something not just that I'll say, but that a lot of people will say about the Nolan movies is that there's too much shaky cam quick cuts in the fights. And it's kind of a mess. Any of the close quarter combat, the CQC, you might say, for Christian Bale's Batman. But it's similar to the 60s TV show, so that's, depending on how you feel about that, maybe a marked positive or negative. But in Batman and Robin, it's a lot of stunt work, but also, backing up a bit, a lot of CGI work. There's a ton of, especially in the third act of that movie, like vehicle chase scenes that all look like CGI toys. And then, you know, bits where like Robin's sky surfing or parachuting or whatever he's doing, and Batgirl on her motorcycle, and it's all CGI stuff. And it looks, you know, CGI hasn't gotten demonstrably better as far as I can tell in the past 2 decades. It's about the same quality you see now. You know, the same criticism that people will give to new Marvel movies like, oh, it looks like a PlayStation 2 cutscene. Well, you know, this was more impressive in 97 when the PlayStation 2 wasn't going to be out for another couple of years. That was almost like a compliment. Let's see. Thrilla, don't look... Okay, already read that. Caleb saying, I've seen parts of The Shawshank Redemption on TV when you were a kid. It's worth watching the whole thing. You know, speaking of the Batman movies, until this week, I don't know that I had seen the whole Batman Returns, like from beginning to end, since it was in the theater, since I was a kid. So it was nice to go back and see it and, you know, compare it with adult eyes. Some of the things, again, I really like about Batman Returns are the production values. It's like an honest sequel. They keep the same Batman design, the costume design, the Batmobile design, which is my favorite Batmobile, the 89 Batmobile. So I'm glad they kept it for Batman Returns. They keep Michael Keaton. They keep, you know, Commissioner Gordon and Alfred. The mansion roughly looks the same. There's some differences. Gotham City looks it's getting a little more theatrical. It's not quite Joel Schumacher levels of theatrical, but I don't know if it was still Anton Furst who was doing production design, but he's the guy who gets a lot of the credit, justifiably so, for just how gothic Gotham City looks in Batman 89. And it looks more like that. It looks honestly like a continuation of that in Batman Returns, which is great. And it looks like they got more money for it. It's crazy to think, even in 1988 or $89, that they were able to make the first Batman movie and have it be as much of a classic for, I think, $35 million. Amazing. Amazing doing that. And then they buffed it up to, I want to say, $80 million for Batman Returns. But I think it was diminishing returns. Or in terms of box office, not accounting for inflation, Batman 89, runaway hit. Batman Returns, a little less so. Batman Forever are going back up a bit. And I also remember at the time, I remember day of seeing Batman Forever and someone asking me after I saw it, so like, what'd you think? And I don't remember if I was trying to be polite or if I genuinely thought this, but I know what I said was, this is a step up from Batman Returns. Watching them all again this week, it's hard to say. I think in my opinion, I like personally, even if it's just subjective, I like each one personally a little bit less than I like the one before it. So I love 89. Batman Returns, like I started to get disappointed in things. There's even more things in Forever that disappoint me, like losing Michael Keaton. And you know who was originally, I've already mentioned it's funny that Chris O'Donnell is like a 25-year-old Robin who's talking in Batman Forever about how like, you don't have to call social services. And I'm like, I know we don't have to call social services. You're 25. You'll be fine. I mean, it's terrible that you lost your family, but it's not quite the orphan origin that most people are used to from the comics and cartoons. You're not a kid. But you know who was originally going to be in Batman Returns? Robin? Because I believe it was Marlon Wayans. One of the Wayans brothers was going to be Robin. And they even have, I think they did like costume fitting for him. And also, if you remember the toys that came out, they were like Robin toys for Batman Returns. Certainly not based off of Marlon Wayans, as it turned out. But it's like they had the mold all ready to go. And I think it was going to be like more the Jason Todd origin, where they catch him like trying to, they catch him like trying to steal the Batmobile or something. And he's like, why don't you come work for me and be my ward? It's like, okay, that sounds like a better deal. Because I know that's basically what happened with Jason Todd. And I think that's what they were going to do in Batman Returns. But it might have been, okay, we've got all these other moving parts. We got to cut something. Which, by the time they got to Batman and Robin, they were no longer saying that. They're like, we got time. We got a subplot for Alfred dying. We got Batgirl, who is now Alfred's niece or whatever. We've got Mr. Freeze, Poison Ivy, Bane, the Floronic Man. Dr. Jason Woodrue is in there for some reason. There's a lot going. Plus, we got to have Bruce Wayne tempted by a trouble blonde. Even at this point, they're really paying lip service to it more than anything. Like Elle Macpherson basically gives them the ultimatum. Hey, you got to get married or, I'm walking away. He's like, okay, goodbye, because I love Poison Ivy. I mean, he was under her spell, but... Anyway, what's going on in the chat? Thrilla saying, CGI looks real, but feels fake. Practical effects look fake, but feel real. That's an absolutely perfect point. Great way of saying it. And you vote for practical whenever possible. I do too. There's some people, a famous example of this, Joe Rogan, will talk about... his example of this is Aliens. Like, if you watch the director's cut of Aliens, the James Cameron version, there's all these practical effects that Joe Rogan says have not held up. Like the matte painting art and the green screen and everything, just, it looks, in his opinion, doesn't look great. And I understand this argument, but I respectfully disagree. I think almost in every case, practical is better. And it's even better if it's like you change what you're doing so that I'm never sure how you're doing it each time. Like the high water mark for this, I believe, is 2001. I still don't know how a lot of the special effects in that Stanley Kubrick movie are being done because it's like they've got a different practical way of doing it each time. But if you just make it computers every time, very quickly your brain's going to read this as, oh, well, that's a cartoon. So I'm like you, Kyle. I vote for practical every time. All right. So at this point, with my sketch, I am getting close to what I might consider a stopping point. So I'm going to start doing my sales pitch for the channel. Even though I'm not done yet, I'm going to start saying the things I say, which is, hey, if you watch this long, I'm sure you already did, but why not smash that like button? Always appreciate it. I think the YouTube algorithm appreciates it too. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. Jump in, join the fun, tap the bell for notifications. I try to, give advance warning to make sure as many people who want to watch this live have the opportunity by announcing it, throwing up that thumbnail a couple days beforehand. But if you got the bell on, you'll always know for sure when I go live. And sometimes I get a little antsy. Like I set it for whatever hour, and then I'm like, okay, I want to go on. I'm ready. And I jump on like 15, 20 minutes early. So that's something, I got to admit too. That's something I'm doing. But I will almost definitely be back this Wednesday to talk more X-Men. I've always got a lot of interest in X-Men videos, so I do more of them. And hey, I like X-Men, so that helps. Let's see. Caleb says, Marlon Wayans actually was supposed to play Jason Todd. Thanks for confirmation on that. There's actually a first draft of Batman Forever with Jason Todd becoming Robin and eventually taking over for Bruce as Batman. I would watch it. I would watch that alternate universe, that Earth 2 version. Thrilla, Kyle, keep it up, Evan. Your stuff is great, man. Thank you. Thank you for saying so. I really appreciate it. It means a lot coming from you. Your stuff is awesome. And I encourage everyone, I think I've already said it, but I'll say it again. Everyone should check out Thrilla Art on YouTube. He's doing great stuff. So what have we learned today? Well, we're all in absolute agreement. Actually, I don't know if that's true. I think we got some people who are loving Batman Forever, some people who are loving Batman 89. I think there's some people out there, even if they didn't say anything, who are big fans of the Nolan films, especially The Dark Knight. I know I got a good buddy who is a super fan of that movie. And will the next one, will Robert Pattinson, pictured right here, will Robert Pattinson keep going strong? Will Ben Affleck ever come back to play old Batman, old Bruce Wayne in a Batman Beyond film? Or would Michael Keaton be the better choice for that? It's hard to say. Kyle, thanks for joining. I will see you later. And I will also, final thing I'll say, and then I'm out of here for the day. I am also probably going to do a review for Birds of Prey whenever I get around to seeing it, but I don't know if that'll be anytime soon. So here is, dun, 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 this still, I'm going to say still roughly work in progress. I didn't add any color to the helmet, but here is the inking job I got done for this Batman art on stream. Thanks everyone for joining. This was a lot of fun to do. And until next time, if you're an artist yourself, what do I always say? You got to keep drawing. The only way to get better. And I'll see y'all next time.